Peace, everyone. I'm Dominique Moon, a multidisciplinary artist whose focus is sensuality and the erotic. Within that, I'm a burlesque dancer, Egyptian style belly dancer, and I'm a portrait artist. I love to talk about pleasure as a whole. So today we'll be discussing pleasure as an anchor. I love the word anchor within this practice because this is about stability in the face of adversity. Another reason why I appreciate the words armor and anchor within this practice is because we live in an invasive system. Anything that is pulling from your body and causing physical ailments, that's an invasive ass system. Anything that is demanding from your body and creating a space where you are not able to sleep efficiently or make a proper meal for yourself or to get fresh air, adequate fresh air, communing with the elements. It's an invasive ass system. It's even more invasive because as human beings, it is too normal. This invasive system has been normalized. So a lot of times we like to override those ailments that come up in our body. We like to override our natural response to harm. We have a very strong emotional response to harm, and we like to override that and suppress it. That's an invasive system that we're living in. That is due to being in an invasive system. So it is important that we have practices that get us centered in our body. And I understand that I use very strong words to describe this system. I use very strong words to describe white culture as well. Invasive, parasitic, cancerous. Those are the words that I'm going to use because this normalcy that has been concocted under the conditions of white culture have been normalized. Okay. It's one thing to cause overt harm, but it's another thing for oppressed people to now covet those systems and protect them. Rather than saying, hey, my body is hurting. Hey, I need to rest. I need to have a longer morning. Rather than saying these things, rather than saying, hey, I need to go and walk for an hour this morning. I need to walk and watch the sunrise for an hour. Rather than acknowledging your body's needs, there is always this quest to still actively go out of your way to protect the systems that are dominant. And when I acknowledge the system as dominant, I'm not saying it from a place of complacency, but I'm saying it from a place of acknowledging what is the reality of, the extent of white culture and the extent of just how invasive and parasitic white culture can be. So with that, knowing this and understanding this, my sense of pleasure has to evade and override everything that white culture is capable of doing to me emotionally. And they would use evangelism to spread their culture across the world. They would use
use evangelism by force, religious evangelism. And I've always joked and said, I'm very evangelical as a witch. I am very evangelical as a sensualist. But I'm mindful of that particular word. But again, knowing how invasive they are, it is important for my sense of sensuality to be invasive in a way, be invasive in a positive way. And I want to liken it to the cypress tree. So the cypress tree here on American soil is not an invasive plant. It is not an invasive tree. However, the roots of those trees, when it comes up out of the ground, it is oftentimes a nuisance to people. That's where a lot of cypress tree logging comes from. This tree is just in the way. These roots are just in the way. So I would like, if I am going to get rid of the word evangelism about my pleasure, I will compare it more so to the power of a cypress tree. Actually, as I am editing this video, this segment is actually new. So today is June 20th? June 21st, actually. Yes, it's June 21st. It's summer solstice. And I'm finally sitting down to come back to offering pleasure, what pleasure is as an anchor for me. Most of this video was recorded back in March. So there has been a shift, but I just wanted to come here and talk a little bit about what that evangelism is and what it means for white culture to be invasive and how we need to conduct ourselves when it comes to our pleasure and well-being. Now, with that being said, I want to share an experience that I've had around pleasure and victory.
So, with this win, I want to share an experience that prefaced it, an experience that is responsible for my victory. So, I got up at 4 a.m. and took a spiritual bath that was heavy in prayer and invocations. And I got out of the bath and I decided to lounge in bed naked. And in this lounging, I did some journaling. And, when we're writing, it's not always like streamlined. There are breaks and pauses between the writing of our thoughts. Okay. And here's what I did in those breaks. So, in those breaks, I paid very special attention to my body. So, I'm lying on my side. So, I have full access to this whole side of my body. And with that, I'm paying attention to the curve in my waist, the part where my waist cinches. I'm paying attention to the roundness of my hips. I'm also paying attention to the parts of my body that may make me feel uncomfortable. Society may make me feel uncomfortable about loose skin. Some parts of my body has loose skin or stretch marks. But what contains me to not internalize those beliefs is focusing on the expansion that my body has had to go through in order to push and bring forth life. The expansion that our bodies go through as we move through life. Puberty, even if you've never had children, your body is still going to expand as you progress in age. It's going to expand and it's also going to drop due to gravity. So rather than internalize these self-deprecating thoughts about my body, I focus on expansion, and that is wealth. And in this, what was the most significant thing about this whole entire process is that I pulled a tarot card. This is where my writing was coming from. So I'm writing around this card, and the card that I actually wait. So the deck that I used, I want to cover the deck first, is from the Dark Goddess Tarot by Ellen Lorenzi Prince. And the card that I pulled from the goddess Tlasoteot is the Corruption card. And Tlasoteot is the goddess of filth and purification. And you see how she is vomiting. And you see the lesions on her skin. So she is the goddess of filth, purification, the contrary to the sweet, loving mother goddess. Tlasoteot is the goddess of disease and prostitution, all of the disgusting things society hates, all of the disgusting things that come from our body as part of our living. You know, vomit, shitting, peeing, menstruating, all of those things. That is her domain. Sin is her domain as well. And so, a key attribute about corruption in this card is avoidance, avoiding responsibilities. And when we avoid responsibilities, it can exasperate an already uncomfortable situation. And in my particular case, my uncomfortable situation was corporate America. Existing in corporate America and having so much of my time being used up by that system. The timing of this ritual is key. That 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. time slot is a time when the world is quiet. And I would describe this time frame as when you are active during this time frame, it is initiatory and it is taking power over the day. I am someone, as a deeply sensitive person, I need to assert my power over the day, especially in the environment, in an invasive parasitic environment. And what I love about that time frame is knowing that there are other conjurers, witches, there are other practitioners who are up at the same time as me. They may be doing something completely different from me, but the similarities and the use of time, the use of knowledge, and in some cases, the use of the elements. And I want to include the elements because I think that the awareness of the outside world, that quietness, and taking advantage of that space, there's something very elemental about that. Because there are times where I can only hear birds or I can only hear June bugs. So I feel like I'm still in connection with the land even while I'm in these four walls. Just have to throw that out there. But the timing is important because I know that there are others who are also utilizing these hours to get work done. And it makes it just adds a communal, collective touch to the work. One of my favorite resources about time is Queen Afua's Sacred Woman. And Sacred Woman Gateway Zero is centered around time. Tackling the day before the sun rises is an aspect that I want to focus on here. And it's not just about what Queen Afua has written about time. It is her guidance. It is the work, but it's really the fruits of her work, the fruits of her guidance as a teacher. And I have seen quite a few women accomplish tasks, accomplish projects that they otherwise were not able to accomplish without that emphasis on the sacredness of time. Like being able to write a whole book just from adhering to the act of getting up before the sun rises, tackling the day before anyone else does. What they say, early bird gets the worm. Now I want to reflect on how this ritual impacted me, how this ritual impacted my experience with the day. And so, with that, we can go back to the corruption card. And I don't think that I specifically thought in my mind, this card is about, the corruption card is about my relation to corporate America. I don't think that was a specific thought that came to mind. However, within the corruption card, avoidance was a key takeaway. And not just the collective avoidance of allowing this corrupt normalcy to take precedence over well being, but it was my own personal avoidance of utilizing my understanding of pleasure as a superpower. And I'd call it a superpower because throughout the day, I was receptive to memories of me tracing my skin with my nails and caressing my curves. Those were the memories that allowed me to transcend time in an environment that I consider to be invasive. That I am aware of how problematic that environment is for me, the environment of corporate America. So those memories gave me the space to transcend time where my workday went by quickly, which is always good for me because that means I have savored my own energy for myself because I generated my power. I generated my strength from the ritual that I did that morning. And it was those memories that allowed me to remain stable and anchored me in my own pleasure. It's almost as if like my pleasure became soil. I was very grounded. And it was this space that I've created for myself that allowed me to override the transgressions of patriarchy. And I want to leave this video on that note as a reminder that we all generate our power from our pleasure from self. And we see pleasure as a tool, and not only as a tool, but also as a weapon, okay? As a weapon. And one thing I've noticed, and this is kind of on a sidetrack, on a little side note, I have noticed too often that certain aspects of pleasure are placed onto patriarchy. Like its existence is because of patriarchy, and we really have to like the existence of pleasure. And I think that's why it is often difficult for people to engage with their own bodies, and not only engage but into indulge, to actually indulge and like want to be in your body. You know, those things are seen as gluttonous. And we do associate that with sin, and we do associate that with harm. But in this case right here, it is a cue, a marker to come out of that mind state about pleasure and begin to interact with pleasure as a form of medicine.